What's Driving Your Striving? The High Cost of Relentless Achievement by Leslie Rohansi. The first few years of my adult life were the striving years. I worked hard, really hard. I chased credentials, opportunities, accomplishments, experiences, titles, recognition. If there was a ladder nearby, I was halfway up it. If there wasn't, I would build one. From the outside, it looked like I was productive, ambitious, and disciplined, the kind of person that people describe as driven, and in some ways, that was accurate. I had energy, curiosity, and a willingness to work hard. Inside, though, something else was going on. Beneath the ambition was a voice that I hadn't yet learned to question. It carried a simple message that kept showing up in my thinking. You're not enough. That belief became the fuel behind my striving behavior, even though I didn't recognize it at the time. Striving became the strategy I used to soothe the not good enough feelings. Adding another achievement felt like a solution. Another milestone appeared, then another goal reached, and surely the next one would finally be the moment when I felt capable, complete, and secure. But that imagined moment of relief never quite materialized, and the finish line just seemed to push further away every time I got close to it. Some high performers recognize this pattern once they slow down long enough to examine it, because what appears to be ambition on the surface is often something quite different underneath. The striving trap. There's no doubt that ambition can be healthy. It can push us to learn, create, contribute, and improve. It's often fueled by curiosity and purpose, and it can produce remarkable outcomes when it's aligned with meaning. Striving, however, is often fueled by something entirely different: fear. It could be fear of failure, fear of being exposed, and fear of not measuring up to some invisible standard that lives inside our heads. And sometimes the driver runs even deeper, a belief formed long ago that our worth can only be earned through achievement. I had an executive coaching client who uncovered the limiting belief that if she wasn't working herself to the point of exhaustion, she didn't deserve to relax or be joyful. What she eventually realized was that her exhaustion wasn't the problem. It was the proof that as long as she was depleted, she had earned the right to feel okay about herself. The exhaustion wasn't just about the work anymore. It had become the evidence of her worth. Researcher Brené Brown has written extensively about the relationship between shame, worthiness, and perfectionism. She describes perfectionism not as a healthy pursuit of excellence, but as a strategy people use to avoid criticism and judgment. In that sense, perfectionism isn't really about doing great work. It's about protecting ourselves from feeling inadequate, and that's an incredibly important distinction. The invisible drivers of relentless achievement. Over the years, I've coached hundreds of leaders, many operating at the highest levels of their organizations. From the outset, these leaders often appear confident, accomplished, and highly capable. Their colleagues admire them, their teams rely on them, and their organizations reward them. Once the coaching conversation begins, however, the internal story often begins to emerge, and a more complicated picture comes into view. Some leaders grew up in families where achievement was the price of approval. Others learned early that praise appeared mainly when they performed well. Some internalized the message that being valuable meant being exceptional. These experiences don't disappear when someone becomes an executive. They simply follow them into the boardroom. Those early lessons become powerful internal engines. Add perfectionism into the mix, and you get a drive that rarely switches off. The leader becomes productive, respected, and admired. At the same time, the internal experience can feel like a treadmill that keeps accelerating. I came across some interesting research about the distinction between work engagement and workaholism, which shows that when people are driven by internal pressure rather than genuine engagement with their work, the long-term results are often less positive than expected. Studies examining compulsive work patterns have linked them to emotional exhaustion, stress, and reduced well-being, even among highly successful professionals. In other words, relentless achievement carries a hidden cost that leaders only begin to see once they pause long enough to examine the forces driving their striving behavior. when success doesn't feel like success. One of the most revealing moments in coaching often happens after a major success, perhaps a promotion, a major project delivered, or a milestone that took years to reach. We would expect to feel a level of achievement or celebration. What some leaders feel instead is relief. That reaction can feel surprising, yet what happens in that moment is that the internal critic finally goes silent. We proved something. We cleared the bar that had been looming over us. Then, before long, the voice returns and introduces the next challenge, asking the inevitable question that follows on the heels of every achievement: what comes next? This is one of the clearest signs that striving is being driven by insecurity. The finish line keeps moving, not because we lack discipline or ambition, but because the real goal was never the achievement itself. The real goal was feeling worthy, and no external accomplishment can permanently answer that question. Ambition with awareness. Many remarkable things in the world have been built by ambitious people. Innovation, progress, and creativity often come from individuals who are willing to pursue bold ideas and difficult goals. The important distinction lies in the motivation behind the drive, because the source of that motivation determines whether ambition expands possibility or ultimately traps a leader on a moving treadmill of achievement. Ambition says that we want to build something meaningful or explore what's possible. Striving, driven by insecurity, says that we need to prove something about ourselves so that we can feel acceptable. Ambition expands possibility. Striving often narrows it. When we begin examining our internal drivers, something interesting happens. We don't lose our drive. In some cases, the opposite happens, and the drive becomes more powerful because it's no longer fueled by pressure or fear. Instead, it starts drawing energy from curiosity, contribution, and purpose. The engine remains strong, but the fuel source changes. Your coaching challenge. Today's challenge requires about 20 minutes of reflection, so grab your journal and favorite pen and find a quiet place where you can relax into this practice. Take a moment to reflect on your own striving tendencies and allow yourself to be genuinely curious about what might be driving it. Step 1. Identify a current goal. Choose something you're actively pursuing right now. Perhaps it's a promotion, a project, a business milestone, or a personal achievement that really matters to you. Step 2. Examine the emotional energy behind that goal. Ask yourself what is truly motivating it. Notice whether the energy feels expansive, such as curiosity, purpose, contribution, or the excitement of building something meaningful. Step 3. Look for a second layer of motivation beneath this. Ask yourself whether any part of the drive is connected to proving something about your worth, gaining approval, avoiding criticism, or quieting an internal voice that says you are not yet enough. Step 4. Step back, review, and discover themes. Many leaders notice that their motivation contains more than one driver, and simply seeing those drivers clearly is often the beginning of greater freedom and choice. Step 5. Use your new awareness to guide your choices. What adjustments might bring your striving back into alignment with the future you want to create? If the goal is fueled mostly by purpose and curiosity, then pursue it with renewed energy. But if you notice that insecurity or the need for approval is doing most of the driving, how could you approach the goal differently? What healthier boundaries do you need? How would you redefine success? What is the deeper reason this goal matters so much to you? Ambition and insecurity often travel together, and recognizing that mixture is part of becoming a more conscious leader. There is no judgment required in that realization. Human beings are complex, and the forces that shape our drive rarely come from a single source. What matters is awareness. When we understand the true engine behind our striving, we gain the freedom to decide whether that driver is still serving the future we want to create, or whether it is simply repeating an old story about our worth. That moment of clarity is often where the real shift begins. Striving doesn't disappear, but it becomes more intentional, more grounded, and more aligned with the life and leadership we actually want to build. Reach out for a free exploratory executive coaching conversation at leslierohansi.com. Have a smooth day.